I came to realize most people don't understand that there is a spin applied to the news before it hits you. Why is it that, especially, with the last 2 years in Gaza, right? Why is it that one side is portrayed in one way, another side is portrayed in another way? Why is it that one nation can be criminal and can be vindicated and can be outcast for their actions, another nation is completely accepted, supported even in very similar or worse actions? Activism is very valuable, but analysis, being an analyst, not an activist, I think is more important in the mid to long term. And I think we lack more in there. Geopolitics is the science of understanding how nation states work. And it's better you understand the bitter truth of, for example, why countries are not doing anything about Palestine. It's better you understand the bitter truth, and then maybe you can take some action in the long term, analytically, than for you to live on a sweet lie, or for you to live on something very convenient like, these guys are all actually closet Zionists or something. You come up with something and you say, khalas, it's over. They're not actually Muslim. These guys are actually something else. That's a very lazy, easy way out. Why don't you keep track of what's happening in geopolitics, right? I'm ethnically Bangladeshi, so I understand stuff about Bangladeshi politics, but I also understand about Egypt. I also understand about Saudi Arabia. I also understand about Turkey. Why? Now, me speaking as a Muslim on this podcast specifically, I understand because that's my ummah. People talk about the Prophet ﷺ, people talk about his seerah, people talk about how he moved, how he walked, how he talked, what he ate. What about how he governed, bruv? The ummah knows about Salahuddin Ayyubi. You know about the conqueror of Jerusalem, no? Of course you do. You know that he took Jerusalem, and then for 600 years it was under Muslim rule, and Jews and Christians and Muslims lived comfortably. But you don't know the political madness that he had to go through before he had an army at the gates of Jerusalem. It's important to point out that every single person listening to this podcast has the capacity to do something.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the Muslim Podcaster. I'm your host Majid, and today I have a very special guest, political analyst, political commentator, Brother Mahfuz, aka NewsBaba. Assalamu alaikum, bro, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you doing, Majid? Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm well, bro. It's pleasure this side as well. How's everything going your side?
It's all right. It's all right. It's busy, but it's good to keep busy, I think.
Yeah, of course, man. You're very busy, man. You're very busy. I'm still trying to work out how you get the time to record. I wake up in the morning and there's already 3 videos there. I'm thinking, how's this guy doing this, man?
You need to wake up earlier then.
Yeah, that's it. But subhanAllah, you're looking fresh in every video. So I'm thinking it's not like he's just woke up as well. You know what I mean? So does this guy?
Allah Mubarak in it. Say mashallah.
Well, listen, bro. Many people listening to you for the first time on my platform anyway. So gonna throw you in the deep end, man. Just tell us a bit about yourself, man.
Okay, so my name is Mahfuz Talukder. To simplify searching my name up on social media, I have taken to the alias NewsBaba, recommended by one of my viewers, supporters. I am ethnically Bengali. Both my parents are from Bangladesh originally. I was, however, born and raised here in the UK. I did not go to a private school, though my accent might get a bit suspicious at times. Just a state school in East London, pretty much a standard East London upbringing, basically. I went and studied biomedical science at university, decided that lab coat, goggles, sanitized everything, working all day under a microscope with blood samples was not my jam. So I decided to get into IT, basically, because I built my own computer early on to save money, and I was interested in that kind of techie stuff. So I thought, all right, let me just see if I can pivot. With the intention, with the niyat, I have to say, of moving into cybersecurity. Why? Because of the big bucks, I was hoping.
Yeah.
So, long story short, after university, did some time in IT, couple years, then moved into cybersecurity. Alhamdulillah, I was able to basically teach myself enough to sell my skills in interviews. Got a few offers, and I took the best one that I had. That was 4 years ago. After about 4 years in cybersecurity, without giving the details, I left my job. Slash was no. Let's just leave it. I left my job. Details undisclosed further. 1 month and what was the date? 1 month and 20 days ago, Majid. So, why did I leave my job? Is normally what I'm asked. I said, I want to focus on some other things. Let's say, that being the stuff I do on social media. Follow-up question is, are you insane? Answer is not that I know of, but that the jury is still out on that. I think some would say. And yeah, now Majid, I'm just focusing on a mission that I have, which is, especially in the English-speaking world, we are given the news, but it's not just here's the facts, bang, it hits you, you make of it what you will. No, it's the facts, and then it goes through a filter, it goes through a mechanism, it starts spinning, and it hits you, and then before you know it, you're spinning like a whirling dervisher from Turkey, and you don't know what the heck is going on. You've been drinking Kool-Aid for the last however many years you've been alive, listening to the news, and you have this perception of the world. And I've been reading and watching the news for basically the majority of my life now. I'm a very avid book reader. I've got too many books. I've had to give some away to charity because there's no space in my box home office for all of the books. And I came to realize most people don't understand that there is a spin applied to the news before it hits you. Why is it that, especially, with the last 2 years in Gaza, right? Why is it that one side is portrayed in one way, another side is portrayed in another way? Why is it that one nation can be criminal and can be vindicated and can be outcast for their actions? Another nation is completely accepted, supported even in very similar or worse actions. And turns out it's because rules for thee, not for me. One set of rules for the West, another set of rules for the rest. Rules-based world order means I set the rules, you follow the order. And I think highlighting that being the reality is a mission I'm on, basically, because I think people deserve to know the objective truth and the analytical assessment from someone who is an avid reader. So I don't claim to be an expert. I claim to know above, though, the common citizenry, maybe slightly above the common citizenry, and I share my takes, my assessments, my coverage of the news, and I throw in stupid dad jokes, and some people say I'm funny, and that seems to have done pretty well. When I started on TikTok specifically, I thought maybe 1,000 people will see what I'm talking about. Maybe 500 people. I remember thinking 500 people, 1,000 people maybe will watch my videos. At least I can say, Majid, I did something. I just want to say that I reported something because I saw something. I understood that it's being manipulated before it reaches the common citizenry by the mainstream outlets. And in this country, they say, see something, say something. So I was saying something. It turns out more than 1,000 people are interested in stuff like this. Turns out people don't like the spin applied to the news before they consume it. I just want the facts. I don't need you to tell me that this group are the good guys, this group are the bad guys. I have intellect myself to decide. So that's the mission I'm on. Penniless. No, I'm joking. It's a mission I'm on as a sort of alternative to full-time employment. We'll see how it goes, inshallah.
Yes, subhanallah, bro. That's quite a journey, though. To be honest, I'm kind of like from a IT background myself, and I kind of gauged that when we were discussing the sound issues before we start recording, that there was an element of tech thinking there. But subhanallah, bro, in terms of the political side, because when I start watching your stuff on TikTok, what stood out to me was, alhamdulillah, there was a lot of research done, and the issue is not a lot of people nowadays will actually go out fishing for the information. And I think even that thing you mentioned about, you want to be the person who sees something and wants to speak out. Unfortunately, people like that are, very few in between, because most people will just go with what they're being told. So, Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make you successful in your mission. It's a
Ameen.
noble
Jazakallah.
mission, inshallah ta'ala, and it's something that's really important. And it kind of links to the sort of opening question. What I wanted to ask you was in terms of why politics is important. And
Mm,
also as well, I know you mentioned this every single video, and it's kind of your theme, which is the unbiased view, and that's true
mm,
because what you're giving is facts, not conspiracies. It's just facts. However, in terms of like from a Muslim Islamic point of view, because if you look
mm,
at the situation of the Ummah,
mm,
and which it has been for you could say a century, a few centuries. Right now, it seems like, from my perspective, is one thing that's lacking in the Ummah. You see, is that political awareness,
mm,
and you can see where people are being tricked over and over again by the same tricks, right? So for me, from that angle, in terms of that's why it's really important. I think where Muslims need to be a bit more politically aware. But from your point of view, because I know you generally your target audience, from what I can see anyway, is everyone and anyone.
mm. Yep.
But from
Check that.
from your personal point of view, from the Muslim Islamic side of you, uh,
Yeah.
why is politics important for Muslims?
It's a good question, Majid. So, first of all, there is a distinction that I would like to make, which is analyst, activist. There's two different kinds of people in this space here. Now, being an activist, I'm not criticizing anyone who is an activist. I'm not saying their efforts are not valuable. It is activism that often moves the needle in policy changes at a national level, policy changes at an international level or multinational level, right? It's the common citizenry saying, you know what, this is not vibing with me, I think, as the kids would say. I don't know, I'm an old man now. Activism is very valuable, but analysis, being an analyst, not an activist, I think is more important in the mid to long term. And I think we lack more in there. You see, something happens in Palestine, everyone's ready. Everyone's on the social media. Everyone's out in the streets with their flags. MashaAllah, fantastic. Okay, we've moved into a space that's because you asked about the Muslim component. I'll talk about the Muslim component, even though non-Muslims are in the same boat, really. There's a lot of emotion, and that emotion sparks a fire, right? But it's short term. A lot of the time, it's short term. There's a narrow bunch of people who will push. They'll make it part of their life's mission to be an activist for one specific thing for Allah knows how long, or as long as they live, right? I'm going to be on this Palestine thing forever. I'm going to be on this Kurdistan thing forever. I'm going to be on this Uyghur thing in Xinjiang forever. Da, 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 da. Okay, fine. But it's if you understand from an analytical perspective, if you can pull yourself out of the emotion and look at things in a more calculated academic way, almost understand how things work before you start shouting and screaming, that I think is missing, because that leads to people who are politically engaged in whatever country you are in. If you're in Saudi Arabia versus being in Egypt versus being in America versus being in the UK, and you're a Muslim, how you operate moving forward will vary spectacularly versus being in China, in Beijing, being in China, in Xinjiang province. Everyone has things they can do, but it's not the same things. If you're not living in a liberal democratic state, you can't be moving like you're living in a liberal democratic state. Then next morning you'll see a nice unmarked van with your name on it, right? You have to operate in a certain way and know how to operate. How am I going to be able to make an impact? It starts with understanding. And I think, see, here, it's important to point out that every single person listening to this podcast has the capacity to do something. It's not the same thing. Not everyone can do the same. I can go out into the streets if I want, especially now that I don't have a job. I can go out into the streets and wave a Palestinian flag, no fear, right? Have no fear. Maybe someone in some part of the Muslim world can't really do that because the state has said, you know what, inshallah, I'll deal with it. Trust your leader, trust your leaders. You sit down, okay? You pray, but don't make dua in public either. Actually, but you pray privately. You pray privately in some parts of the Muslim world. But every single person has something to do, but it starts with understanding, and understanding is where a lot of the people are lacking. You see, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of geopolitics. Geopolitics is the science of understanding how nation states work, and what lots of people don't understand, because it's not codified very well, right? There's academics who properly understand it in a political science capacity, in an international relations capacity, and they have their university students, and then everyone else is just like, politics is politics. It sucks everywhere you are in the world, and that's it. There's no connection between the academic and the practical, or there's very little connection, I should say. But this is how it works, right? Nation states operate like a big ship, right? You have a captain of a ship, you have a team, you have a crew, and then you have the citizens on board, right? The citizens aren't steering the ship. The captain and his crew are steering the ship. Now, depending on nation, the captain and his team are put in their position of responsibility, steering the ship in different ways. You can have a centralized authority, like in China, like in Russia to some extent, or you can have a more democratically focused mechanism, like in some of the Western European countries, like in America, though America right now especially is moving more towards an oligarchic setup. But what I'm saying is, nation states have administrations, and they have a certain governance model, and they're sailing their ship, and they have a certain economic model they adopt as well. And then every nation, like in a video game, every nation is just playing the game. Every nation's playing the same game, a similar game, and they have different strengths, they have different weaknesses, they have their culture, they have their religion, they have their populations to deal with, they have their education level, they have their infrastructure, they have the relationships with other countries. And based on a combination of all those factors, the administrations are making decisions. Now, for someone to understand that, this is a very calculated way of me, explaining it. I haven't gone into activism. I'm not saying, oh, this government, the Ummah's lost, bruv. Look at this country, look at that country. The Ummah's, we're cooked, as the kids would say. We're cooked. Well, okay, fine. You can say we're cooked, but you have to understand the geopolitics. Do you know that if an administration moves a bit too mad, according to some neighbor, that neighbor is going to suddenly, defend themselves in that country? Now what? An administration has to think of a variety of different things that you as a normal citizen do not have to think of. And that's not me sort of supporting one administration over another, but it's saying that there's cold geopolitical calculations taking place. And it's better you understand the bitter truth of, for example, why countries are not doing anything about Palestine. It's better you understand the bitter truth, and then maybe you can take some action in the long term, analytically, than for you to live on a sweet lie, or for you to live on something very convenient like, these guys are all actually closet Zionists or something. You come up with something and you say, khalas, it's over. They're not actually Muslim. These guys are actually something else. That's a very lazy, easy way out. But it's much harder to say, for example, in the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, bruv, these guys have like a string of settlements on the coast, on the bank of the Great Desert that make up, Saudi Arabia. And on the other side, you have a violent, militant, heavily armed, high-tech neighbor. If you don't fall in line to some extent, khalas, they're going to defend themselves in your cities, and then Amman is going to have a different flag waving from the Capitol building. So you have to, the administration in Jordan has to survive before they do anything else. So you can't go to Jordan and be like, hey, why are you not speaking out about the Palestinians? They're like, I'm nearly dead myself. Give a brother a break. So there's an understanding that I think is missing, and also political engagement is missing. So I want to sort of, through my content, explain to people that it's interesting, it can be engaging, it can be frustrating. I understand that, but you watch like TV shows and you watch films, and there's a roller coaster of emotions. Why don't you keep track of what's happening in geopolitics? Right? I'm ethnically Bangladeshi, so I understand stuff about Bangladeshi politics, but I also understand about Egypt. I also understand about Saudi Arabia. I also understand about Turkey. Why? Now, me speaking as a Muslim on this podcast specifically, I understand because that's my ummah. Right? all of us are part of one basket. And if you zoom out further, which is what I do in my content, all of us are humanity as well. So there should be a desire, one could argue, to understand how the world is operating. Look at some of the leading models on earth and see if actually that they're doing a better job than us, aren't they? Can we learn from them? There's nothing wrong with learning, right? So understanding politics and geopolitics, which is one level up, I would say, I think is fundamental. People talk about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People talk about his seerah. People talk about how he moved, how he walked, how he talked, what he ate. What about how he governed, bruv? What you talk about the four khulafa, the rightly guided caliphs. What about how they governed? They were politicians. Oh no, I hate politicians. No, you don't hate politicians. You've been taught that it's a hopeless endeavor. It's not hopeless. You know, the Ummah knows about Salahuddin Ayyubi. You know about the conqueror of Jerusalem, no? Of course you do. You know that he took Jerusalem and then for 600 years it was under Muslim rule and Jews and Christians and Muslims lived comfortably. But you don't know the political madness that he had to go through before he had an army at the gates of Jerusalem. He had Muslim little princes, little kings trying to carve out their own empires, and he's moving on the Crusader states, and some Muslim decides, you know what, it's time for me to expand my territory because I'm the man. No, bro, no, you have to backhand quite a few of them, touch, get them all out of the way, get everyone in order, then march on Al-Quds or Jerusalem. But you have to, if you look into the history of Salahuddin, he was a politician first. And through his understanding of politics, through his understanding of military strategy, and his understanding of how can I keep this guy in check, how can I keep this guy in check, he made it to Al-Quds. He had bigger dreams. He wasn't able to fulfill all his dreams, but at least he aimed for the moon and he landed amongst the stars. But us lot, we see one dodgy election, we're like, khalas, bruv, whoever's in power, it's over. I don't deal with politics, Mahfuz. I've got other things. You know what? And I say, okay, fine, you don't deal with politics, yeah? You best not be complaining about what your children are learning in school. Then you best not be complaining about how people on the street are treating you or our mothers or our sisters. You best not be complaining about what in parliament is being said about the Muslims or what is not being said about the Islamophobia in this country. But you don't care about politics, no? You don't care about politics. But politics governs your very life. It governs how you get a job, how much you earn in that job, how much you pay in taxes, what those taxes are spent on, how you can raise your kids, what they are taught in school, what they can eventually do in a role. Your whole life is being managed, below Allah and His management. Your whole life is being managed by a government. And you're not going to engage in that. Lol. That's a big loss, my G. So I think more of us need to understand how politics works, how administrations work, how governance works, because the more people understand, the more they and their family and the descendants will be equipped to be able to make a change. To make a change, you have to understand. Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese military general, said, know your enemy and know yourself. And in 100 battles, you shall never be in peril. But if you don't know what the enemy is rolling with, how are you going to fight him? How are you going to fight him, bro? There's famous, I won't name names because then this might get a bit dicey, but there's famous military commanders in the Holy Land, let's say, right now, that speak fluent Hebrew. Bro, why would you need to speak Hebrew? Because who are they fighting? They need to know their enemy. Right? They speak Arabic and they speak Hebrew. Maybe some English as well to make the wider audience understand their struggles. So politics is very fundamental because my assessment is without understanding politics, without being involved in politics, the Muslims can never prosper. Obviously, prosperity and success is from Allah. But then what is the practical manifestation of Allah opening that door for you? Well, He gives you the key, you open the door. Then it's from Allah, isn't it? But what is the key? I think the key is understanding geopolitics, understanding how countries work, understanding how you can make an impact. And if enough people understand and share a vision of, let's say, prosperity in this country or that country, a dissociation from imperial exploitative foreign powers, and potentially a unifying objective that country, you're a Muslim population, we're a Muslim population, mutual benefit. Okay, let's confederate, let's federate, let's become one nation eventually. Like that all takes educated, politically educated, driven individuals, and that's what I'm trying to generate. You know, some people are in my comments like, Mahfuz, before your stupid jokes and da 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 da, I didn't find any interest in geopolitics. Now I enjoy it. Of course you enjoy it, bruv. It's like a TV show, but real life. It's interesting, bruv. It's so, we can get into it later, hopefully, but I need to give you a chance to get a word in edgeways. Otherwise,
No, that's cool, bro. You know, to be honest with you, from what you've said, there's loads to unpack. I mean, firstly, the difference between activism, like you said, and the sort of like having that awareness politically, we can see that because when the emotion kicks in, people will go out, and ultimately, if that emotion isn't being focused and driven down the correct path, then people will tire, people will soon lose that fizz, or they will even be directed down the incorrect path because that awareness isn't there. In terms of the what you mentioned about the politics about the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Khulafa, I think that's really interesting because if you think about what you mentioned, if the Muslim Ummah isn't politically aware, if they don't understand geopolitics, they won't be able to prosper. They won't be able to stand on their feet again. And it's no coincidence that if you look at generally the attack on Islam from its adversaries, whether it's, you know, whether you want to call it Islamophobia or whatever, that attack generally isn't against the what you could term spiritual aspect of Islam, right? They've even termed it, the problem is political Islam. So for Muslims, they think politics, first of all, they'll say politics is dirty. Look at these MPs here, you know, they were all killing it with their expenses and stuff like that. So automatically they get put off because they don't understand politics. And then secondly, even if they do have a grasp of politics, they're being told that actually Islam and politics, you know, doesn't have a connection. And if it does, that's by the loony crazy people. You want to stay away from them, you know, unless you want to be sitting in Belmarsh or something, right? So I think that's deliberate.
Yeah, it is deliberate. I agree with you because you see, it's look. Give me 1 second, Majid. I think my wife has come with a tea resupply. Needs to be accepted.
Yeah, go for it, bro.
Allah bless our wives, you know.
Ameen.
And mothers and all women folk. The supporters often behind the scenes, though less and less these days, for better or worse. I'm not supporting or opposing it, but yeah, as you were saying, you see, if you look at it from the perspective of nation states, in the past and now, just look at it analytically, right? Just look at it on a piece of paper. Like, okay, you got 2 billion people here. They agree on a lot of things. There is a natural affinity they have with one another. That's a very potentially stabilizing force if an administration could take power over all of them and use that to keep them unified, like a glue. Okay, they seem to be very resilient, where you're really going to struggle to make them give up their beliefs and their culture attached to their faith. And actually, historically, when they have unified, they've led the world at certain times. We can't have that because then we can't lead the world, right? We can't exploit Africa and the Middle East and South Asia if they all be unifying and then killing it, right? Winning. So what we're going to do is we're going to demonize this idea. We're going to try and get them to say, your faith, your way of life, yeah, that needs to stay private. That needs to be somewhere I can't see it, right? If I can see it in public, you're doing something wrong. Now, should you push back against that? Maybe, I don't know. I try to stay unbiased in my assessments, but let us say from an analytical perspective, let me go back to how geopolitics works, yeah, Majid? So an administration managing their citizen population is like a game. There's like things that can help you keep control. There's things that will make you lose control. And if it gets too far, you might suffer a rebellion or an assassination attempt or a revolt, right? Think of it, I think of it like a game because I'm a gamer, well, from back in the days, right? And when you're playing certain games, it's like that. It's all codified. In the real world, it's not as codified. You don't know where the limits are, but that's how it works, right? As a government, you implement certain policies, your civilians get happier, they support the government more. You do something booky, they get a bit sadder. You have to balance that with other people. Like your military wants certain things as well, and your elites want certain things as well, and you have only so much money. So if you give it to everyone, there's always like you give it to some people, it means withholding it from other people, and you manage that poorly, you flop to your country basically. You might get sent on a surprise one-way trip to, I don't know, heaven or hell. That's not that's not up to me. But I've almost lost my train of thought. Majid, you'll be surprised how often this happens. But what I'm trying, so coming back round, what I'm saying is, if it benefits the current administrations on earth to keep the Muslims away from this thought that some random guy in Saudi owes something or has some affinity with a random guy in Pakistan, if it benefits my administration to keep that link distant, I'll keep that link distant. I will not push to facilitate unifying rhetoric. If it one day benefits my administration to have that unifying rhetoric, best believe those administrations, they're going to turn on their heads. They're going to say, yeah, no, those are your brothers out there.
Like we saw with the Soviets in Afghanistan.
Yes, very much like that. So fatwas change based on political, based on a specific administration's needs. They will wield Islam. Various countries, not one specific country, various countries. They will wield Islam like a club, how they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate at a citizen level, it might be quite upsetting to hear that, because you're thinking, bruv, this is my identity. This is my yeah. I get that. I'm not taking away your relationship with Allah, but I'm saying administrations will use whatever you give them, and religion is a big component of the lives of many. So you either use that to your advantage, or if it's going against the objectives of your administration, you suppress the hell out of that thing, right? Because you can't have you stop banning organizations if you need to, because those organizations might be problematic to my administration. But I can't have these people talking about how they're a brotherhood with one another. Bro, no, you fall in line. I'm the boss here. Okay, let me just ban that organization, because that's looking a bit booky, right? For example, it leads to interesting situations, Majid, because, for example, Reform in the UK with Nigel Farage as their party head, he's very chummy, very buddy with the Emiratis in the United
Yeah.
Because the Emirati administration, no hate on the Emiratis, by the way, but the administration, I'm talking about from an analytical perspective, the administration is not fond of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a political party, right? I'm not endorsing them or supporting them. I'm using this as an academic way of helping people understand. You have a Muslim nation, Muslim in the sense, Emiratis are, Muslim. So let's just call it a Muslim state. The current administration don't particularly like this group, right? Muslim Brotherhood. Nigel Farage and his boys down the street from here, probably, because I live in London, they also don't like the Muslim Brotherhood. So now you have a very interesting situation where Reform and Nigel Farage, who hate on Muslims daily in the UK, are friends with the UAE. What's going on there? Well, Geopolitics explains it. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You both hate the same group, so might as well buddy up, right? So if you understand geopolitics, it gives you some clarity. It gives some clarity as to what is going on, and then maybe you can decide to do certain things based on that. I don't think that answers the question at all, does it? I don't even know where we started.
No, I think it's important. I think that's important because, like you said, it's built on what the states and their objectives and what's in their benefit. And ultimately, if you think about it, for the West, for the current world order, and which has been for decades, a century now, at the end of the day, it's not in their benefit to have a unified Muslim world.
No, not true.
It's not, because at the end of the day, it's a direct threat. So that's why a lot of people when they think about, just say, the US, it's war against Islam and so on, and against Muslims. People
Mm.
sometimes don't really understand it because they're looking at it purely from a religious point of view, thinking, well, why would the US be at war with Islam as of itself? But if you look at it from a point of view of in an ideological way, then it's not in their interest for the Muslims not to be within their orbit, the leaders, not the resources that it's utilizing. It's not in their benefit, because if the Muslims were to rise up, then on an ideological level, that's a threat, because they have all the resources, they have manpower, they have the strategic roots in the world. So even just from a geopolitical point of view, you can see why, you know, once your enemy is, on the ground,
Yeah.
you'll do what it takes to make sure
Don't
he
let them
doesn't
get
rise.
back up. Yeah, don't be silly. And this goes beyond, America. There's no America hate here.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying I love America, but I'm saying I'm not here to advocate for or against them. I'm here to analyze, right? We're here to understand. So let's understand. Before America, the Ottoman Empire. Some
Hmm.
people even call it the Ottoman Caliphate, right? But let's call it empire. The Ottoman Empire collapsed when, Majid? After the First World War, right?
Yeah.
They picked the wrong side. They got destroyed, and the great powers of Europe at the time, led by the UK, led by France, they came in and carved up the Ottoman territories, right? They promised to this family, you can have that cute little kingdom over there in the desert. Okay, there's another family there. Did I promise you something? Okay, you can have that. It's like just handing out stuff like you won a contest and now you're paying your shareholders or something. I don't know. And the UK and France, they sought to go right to the heart of that Muslim empire, the Ottoman Empire, into the Anatolian heartland. If you look up Anatolia, it's like this sort of rectangle shaped land that makes up modern day Turkey. Look up um, the Treaty of Lausanne and the
Hmm.
Treaty of Sèvres, right?
Hmm.
The initial treaty, the initial demand of the Western powers was that Turkey would be like this little state in the middle of Anatolia. They wouldn't hold their west, they wouldn't hold their east. Part of the land would become French territories, part of the land would become British. The Greeks would get a lot more. And a man sort of rose up, mobilized the forces of the Turkish people, and said, "Nah, we're not having that. I'll have that. I'll have that. We're gonna have Turkey be much bigger than you initially said." And they uh, through conflict pushed out the Turkish borders to what they are today. Now that man is called Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Loads of people will say this man is a dangerous man, right? He was very secular. He enforced secularism on the majority Muslim population of Turkey. He did. I'm not supporting him. But you see, without him, maybe Allah chose him in an interesting way. Without him, Turkey would be much weaker today. They wouldn't have their cultural capital of Istanbul. The Greeks would have it potentially, right? They wouldn't have Erzurum and the coasts on their western part. They wouldn't have the gates to the Bosphorus, right? So now the Turkish administration's not as secular, let's say, as Mustafa Kemal, and they're sort of changing the direction of the country. And it all started there, though. So my point is, even after the First World War, the Western powers sought to break up one of the great powers of that time, which was the Ottoman Empire, this Muslim state. They helped Egypt when Egypt tried to break away. They helped the Arab states that exist today when they said that we'll turn on the Ottoman rulers if you help us with our independence. The Hashemite Kingdom, Saudia, there was a variety of cooperation with the Western powers, and that benefited the UK, that benefited France, because if you go back far enough to the time when Ottoman power was at its height, there was a completely busted dynamic that Muslims could not comprehend today. I'm sure many Muslims would not be able to comprehend. The Queen of England would write letters requesting aid from the Sultan of the Ottomans. And she would sign her letters, "Your loyal servant, the Queen of England." Bruv, people would be like, wait, what? Britain was that like humble and subservient in front of the Sultan of the Muslims? What fantasy are you writing, Mahfuz? No, no, no. Look it up. Look up the 16, 1700s. That was the dynamic. But that was the Muslims were too capable back then. So afterwards, the Western powers, they sought to dismantle that kind of Muslim unity and keep it dismantled, because these guys, when they unify, it gets a bit magical, it gets a bit freaky. We don't want that. Okay, that's problematic, right? So look at today, like you said, right, from Morocco in the west to Iran, Pakistan in the east, to Indonesia, Malaysia in the far east, Bangladesh, you have powerhouses, huge populations. Indonesia, largest Muslim population on earth. Malaysia, technologically very advanced. Bangladesh, one of the world's leading garments industries, right? Pakistan gives the Muslim world nuclear capability, right? You have the defense industries of Turkey with their Bayraktar drones and whatnot, and their Khan fifth generation fighters. Go back to natural resources. You have the Gulf monarchies. You have the Gulf monarchies. You have Egypt sitting on the Nile with the Suez Canal right there. You got the Bab al Mandeb and the Strait of Hormuz, both held on both sides by Muslim states. You can't let all of that unify. You're crazy. That's GG for us. That's a multipolar world where they are, they go past the European Union in terms of capability. You can't have that. That's insane. And they all speak a similar language potentially, or they at least all understand to some extent Arabic. Can't have that. That's a headache. The EU is, is sort of hobbles along because one guy's speaking French, one guy's speaking German, another guy's speaking English. They're all confused half the time, right? or they're driving the same car but in different directions. But Muslim unity would be problematic, strategically speaking, for outside powers. So it's much easier to install administrations of separate nations in the Muslim world who have administrative objectives, geopolitical objectives of taking care of themselves. Let me ask you this, Majid. Why? Loads of people get frustrated from an emotional place. They ask, why has Saudi Arabia not taken care of Palestine? What's going on? Bruv, these guys are blah, 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 all kinds of criticism I hear, right? Why is Egypt, bruv, the president of Egypt, he's because he doesn't take care of the Palestinians? Why doesn't he take them in? Or why doesn't he send the Egyptian army in? Saudi Arabia, you're doing X, Y, Z, you say this, that, and the other, but get one cup of water into Palestine, please. You can't do it, can you? Because your master doesn't let you. I hear all kinds of criticism like that. I'm not saying those things, by the way. I'm saying that's what you hear in the Muslim community. I'll tell you why. You go back to geopolitics, it makes complete sense. Saudi Arabia is a country that its own military capabilities are heavily reliant on the United States. The whole Saudi Army, Navy, Air Force, everything is basically just weapons purchases from America. They don't have their own military industrial complex, right? Now, Saudi Arabia, especially 30 years ago, during Pax Americana, that was the last age. That was the era of American hegemony on earth. In that world, Saudi Arabia had an option. You either fall in line and America would take care of you. Your people will be taken care of. You have rich resources. You can sell them. You can prosper. Your people will live comfortably. Or you step out of line. You choose a foreign policy that detracts from the American one. And I'm going to choke you so hard, you'll forget what oxygen tastes like. Saudi Arabia chose the easier option. Okay? I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they chose, they chose one option. Iran, just as an example, chose the exact opposite option, right? So that's why Saudi Arabia is as rich as it is today, but with a limited foreign policy capability. And that's why Iran has very expanded foreign policy capability. They can say what they want, do what they want, but they're very impoverished. They're very poor, right? Because of the different decisions they made geopolitically. So going back to Palestine, why does Saudi Arabia not do anything for Palestine? Well, first of all, they do quite a lot in terms of humanitarian aid and donations, you could say, individuals and at the state level. Billions, we're talking. But where it really matters, what Palestinians really need is, bruv, send in the jets, send in the tanks, sort this occupier out. Can't do it. Because my protector, the one who's sold me all these weapons, he loves me, maybe. He loves him more. And by him, I mean Israel. So I can't. My hands are tied on this foreign policy. That's the deal I made. And the Saudi administration has to, it thinks the Palestinians aren't Saudis. And I never claimed to be Khalifa of the Muslims. So I'm taking care of my people. And you can agree with that or disagree. I'm not being their spokesperson. But I'm saying that's the thinking of the Saudi administration. It's a similar thinking of the Egyptian administration, thinking nafsi nafsi, me first. And they have a vision. They have a vision 2030. I want to grow economically. I want to grow capable. I want to keep my citizens taken care of. Those citizens there, I wish I could, but oh well, I can't. And they're not mine. Then I don't claim them. Citizens in my country might claim them as brothers and sisters, but I, at a state level, I'm not responsible for those guys over there. And that's exactly, you see, that's exactly, Majid, what the enemies of a sort of unified Muslim bloc, that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted to break the countries up so that administrations are in power that say, those guys aren't Saudis, so it's not my problem. And the Egyptians are like, yeah, it's not my problem either. Those guys aren't Egyptians. And in the north, the Turks are like, bruv, they're not even our ethnicity. We're Turks, they're Arabs, bruv. You know, the administrations, no one claims them. So it forms a world stage level bystander effect. Someone's being punched in the middle. You know it's wrong, but everyone's just circled, encircling the thing, the scene. They're just watching. Like no one's like, "You're gonna go first? Let me go." Nah, I can't go unless you go. And everyone's just doing that while someone in the middle getting pummeled to death. So it's worked out fairly well. But there is hope, as I talk about in a lot of my analysis pieces. There is hope in the sense that if you're hopeful for, not that I'm being biased, but if you're hopeful for a change in the Middle East, there is hope in the sense that factually on the ground, America is moving out of the Middle East in terms of their influence as they want to focus more on the Western Hemisphere. And that is opening up new options and new realities for the regional powers in the Middle East. Examples being Saudi Arabia, for example, has turned more and more east, looking at China for its defense, for its trade. The majority of oil sold by Saudi Arabia now goes to China. And actually, over the last couple of years, the GDP of Saudi Arabia, historically, over half their GDP is now not oil-based, which is crazy. It's insane, but it's the truth. So with a move away from reliance on America for your defense, for your foreign policy, you might move into a situation where you're able to make your own foreign policy choices. And at that point, the Saudi administration, I'm just using Saudi as a big example because they're a very strong player. They're one of the 5 regional powers, and I think the wealthiest in the Middle East of the 5 regional powers. It might come to a point where Saudi Arabia's foreign policy is no longer tied at the hip to American foreign policy, and they look at their citizens, and the citizens are like, yeah, we could we finally do something about the Palestine thing? And Saudi Arabia is like, say no more. We can do that, especially if you love me more afterwards. And citizens are like, inshallah, Habibi, we'll love you for sure, for sure.
You know, Brother Mahfuz, in terms of the rulers, from what you mentioned there, some may argue that in terms of the regimes, the administrations that are in the Muslim world now, these regimes were historically placed there for a specific reason. And even if you look at their domestic policies in terms of not just external powers like the West, Russia, or whoever, who see the rise of Islam as a threat, but you can see that since these administrations, since these regimes were put in place by the colonialists, these guys have actually been doing the job for the West domestically in their lands, right? I mean, as an example, I know if you look at it from a point of view of GDP and you look at it from a point of view of progress for Saudis in terms of non-reliance purely on oil, some may say that it's moving in the right direction. But if you look at it from an Islamic point of view, and you can see the route they're taking and the stuff that's now opening up within Saudi, you see that as a negative. And so it probably depends on which lens you look at. But these administrations, in no way is it in their interest for the to have a unified Muslim land, for Islam to be basically the constitution of the land, because at the end of the day, it goes back to nafsi nafsi, it goes back to your own throne, because the same way the Quraysh, many deep down believed that the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was telling the truth because he was Al-Amin. But from their point of view, You understand what I'm trying to say? So in terms of any change, you can see that from the Ummah point of view, this powerhouse which is shackled, one of the major obstacles are these very administrations. So yeah, I agree with you the fact that someone could argue that even if they wanted to do something, so for example, if Saudi wanted to do something against the Zionists, right? If all their weapons are supplied by the US, they'll just press a button and they'll all be useless, right?
Oops, it doesn't work anymore. I don't know how that happened.
It doesn't work anymore, right? So yeah, you can see that also. But but also from a point of view of there actually even being a desire for these regimes to do something, I think maybe there's too much credit being given to them in that respect, because from an Islamic point of view, I mean, this is maybe one of the questions I want to ask you, where, because I know the lens you look at, unbiased, geopolitical, but in terms of from the Islamic lens, and maybe this is where for yourself there may be sometimes moments of conflict and stuff like this, because from the Sharia, we know how these administrations, how the Muslims in the region, how they should be behaving from the Sharia point of view. The Ummah is one body, and so
There's
on
no
and so
conflict.
forth, right? You understand what I'm trying to say? So
I understand what you're trying to say, but there's no conflict, Majid. There's zero conflict. I'll tell you why. Because have I openly come out in support of any administration?
No.
Have I openly opposed any administration?
No.
No. Every person has a role to play. The role I have chosen for myself by Allah's permission is to learn and to relay so that people can learn. And I invite people to go beyond people like myself, learn from even better people, because I'm just a common man, right? Now, let me explain something to you. This idea of should is in geopolitics a bit weak. No offense to you. But this nation's administration should do this. Says who, bro? What, you? Who are you? Who am I? An administration will do whatever it can get away with in the pursuit of its own goals. If Majid was the state of, let's say, Egypt, you would run Egypt in a different way from Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And Abdel Fattah al-Sisi runs the state of Egypt in a different way from Mohammed Morsi before him. Yes? Every administration has different priorities and therefore and different characteristics and personalities. It's better to understand that administration's character and personality and then see where you fit in. And I want to cut a certain idea out of people's brains. Or not cut it out of people's brains, but highlight that it's not so easy. Some people say, bruv, we need to get rid of these regimes. Khalas, we need to dump this, bring in something better. Okay, hang on there, flyboy. There's a problem. Geopolitics dictates that you look at the geography of where you are. So, for example, Iran is a perfect case study for right now. Loads of people are, probably not you, Majid, you probably wouldn't be in this group, but loads of people are like, we want the Shah back. We want a different Iran, a non-Islamic Iran. We want a free Iran. We're going to party like in Europe, bruv. Like, okay, fine. You want that? Okay. Who promised you that? Like, the people who want democracy in Iran, if the Iranian administration right now, the theocratic Islamic Republic led by the Ayatollah, if that collapses, from what angle is democracy going to come? Well, I don't under. There's a missing piece of understanding that enemies will abuse. If the administration of Iran collapses now, there is a wolf waiting. There is a vulture circling. As soon as it collapses, it swoops in. Best to believe Israel's geopolitical objectives are best served by ensuring as soon as Iran is down, we break it into 1,000 pieces. We Balkanize it. The word Balkanize, by the way, comes from the Balkans, where I think Yugoslavia collapsed into a bunch of states and basically became far less capable as a bloc. And so you just have a bunch of small countries. So they would love for Iran to be fragmented and fighting each other. The Arabs in Iran maybe are fighting the Kurds in the west of Iran, and the rest of them are fighting the Persians. That's great for Israel, because now not only is my main enemy buried, dead in the water, but I'm making sure that never again will a theocratic regime like that, independent of American policy, not subservient to anyone, never again shall such a state like that arise. So similarly, you have to look at, if let's say, not that I'm supporting it or opposing it, just looking at it as a hypothetical. Let's say some prince got a bit brave in Saudi Arabia, decided I'm going to shake things up. Or let's say someone said, you know what, Mohammed Morsi was the bomb. Not that kind of bomb, different bomb. And Sisi, I don't really like him too much, so I'm gonna overthrow him and do something mad, right? We're gonna usher in a new era in Egyptian history. Okay, fine. You want that? Okay, fine. Have you looked at the practicalities? If the administrations right now in power collapse, who guaranteed you the next administration is going to be better? What if it gets worse?
Mm-hmm.
What if the next guy who comes in, wants Egypt to be completely subservient to Israel? They're like, this is the safest way. I'm going to go straight under Israel. I'm going to acknowledge that Israel is going to be the regional power even when America is gone, and Egypt is going to be their loyal right-hand man. Right now, that's not the case. Egypt right now is playing in a more delicate survival mode. Like, Israel's right there next door, and Egypt is not as economically or technologically capable. So they're in a sort of weird balance where they're actually preparing for any sort of conflict with Israel, but they also have their significant citizenry to balance out, because if they get too cozy with Israel, Sisi and his government know that they're going to have to deal with more headache from their citizens. Their citizens are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, please, like, within reason, brothers, right? So they've already got a balancing act. If it collapses and something worse comes, well, now your objectives are out the window for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 generations. So you have to operate very carefully. You have to make sure that your activism, your emotion, doesn't override calculation. So let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
If enough people in Saudi Arabia, let me give you a hypothetical. If enough people in Saudi Arabia said, we're rich, we're comfortable, and actually now we're relying less and less on the US, and we're relying more and more on China, and China's behavior as a character on the world stage. Every nation has a character, has a personality. And by nation, I mean the administrations of nations, really, more specifically. China's character is not interventionist.
Mm-hmm.
Zhongguo, as China calls itself, the Middle Kingdom, they take care of the Middle Kingdom. They don't really care what's going on there, what's going on there. They will interfere economically. They won't really interfere militarily. China has one base outside of China across the globe. America has 800. What? It's imagine, it's a completely different character. America comes from the root European mindset of, I need to take care of those guys over there. They don't know any better. They're so uncivilized. I'm civilized. So I need to come over there, give them some freedom, democracy, teach them their ways. If they use that democracy to roll back, I'll step back in and be like, you can vote freely, but not like that. China's not like that. China's like, let's make some economic deals, but how you govern your country, that's completely up to you. Right? So if Saudi Arabia is now pivoting slowly towards China, you see that, okay? You see that. In that environment where the administration in Saudi is less reliant on America, so it's got a bit more freedom, flexibility in its foreign policy. If enough Saudi people at the grassroots was convinced that, you know what, we're wealthy, we're comfortable, and our foreign policy is opening up, I actually want us to do more for the Palestinians over there. If enough Saudis whisper, because you don't go out.
Bro, I've lost your sound for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was saying, if enough Saudi people want Saudi Arabia to do more for Palestine, you don't go out into the street with Palestinian flags. That's a different model. That maybe works in the UK. In Saudi, you whisper into the ears of the right people. And the Saudis know best whose ears you need to whisper into, right? At the grassroots. You go up to the administrators, you go up to the governors, you go up to the regional governors, and they whisper. Eventually, it goes into Mohammed bin Salman's ear enough times. And actually, some people might say, Prince Mohammed, listen, we have the option now. We have the reliance on America. It's weak enough now. for us to be able to do more over there in the Holy Land. Right? We can say more. We can potentially do more. We can start severing contracts if we want. We're economically strong enough. And you know what? You have to go back to the administration's objectives, Majid. Right? So you have to say, oh Prince Mohammed, it benefits us. It benefits your Vision 2030 because the people of Saudi will rally around you if they see you do this. They'll love you regardless. Because if you've been to Saudi Arabia, if you've spoken to Saudis, they are like 100% with their prince, by and large. Not that they, you could say because they have no choice, but I'm not saying that. But I'm saying their head of state, acting head of state, has taken care of them. He has, economically, right? There is in their hearts this desire for something else, foreign policy wise. Now, if he can achieve anything in that direction, the people will love him even more, and that would benefit the Saudi administration. So you have to, if you have an objective, you have to put it into the administration's prioritization. You have to sell it to the administration.
But
You can say,
that
bomb the administration, I'll make a better administration, but there's no guarantee that you will be successful. That's what I'm saying.
But if the prioritization of the administration is the problem, because
Yes.
what I mean is because right now, even someone like Assad, look at, I mean, we know what Assad, how he was viewed around the Muslim world.
What, man like Bashar?
Bashar Assad, yeah, Bashar
Oh,
Assad,
okay,
right?
okay. Oh no.
Just say he started
dear.
firing now scuds when he was around, right? He started firing scuds towards the Zionist entity, right? Even though this is pure hypothetical, you know that there are people who probably will still rally around them. Even, for example, we see with Hezbollah. Remember, Hezbollah was very popular. Then what it did in Syria, it lost its popularity with the Sunni world anyway. But then since Gaza happened and it was doing what it was doing, amongst the people who went against them, they were like, okay, yeah, we have to rally again. Have to rally for them, right? So you're right in terms of every administration is going to do what's in its benefit. But if that benefit is incorrect, I think then it's just going to prolong the administration rather than any desired change that somebody else, not the administration, because they are actually working towards what their priority is. But other people who don't see that as their priority, they won't see any change. They'll only see movement in one direction.
I've got a good answer for you here, and I understand your concern. So, an administration will do what it can get away with. I've already said that once, right? But what it can get away with, why did I phrase it like that? Because every administration has constraints on it.
Sure.
I want XYZ as the head of this country. Okay, fine. Now, let's say a whole bunch of my population will be really unhappy if I pursue XYZ head on. I have to take that into account. Otherwise, I risk a revolt. So I have to balance the civilian desire with my own desire. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, if enough people at the grassroots understand and learn and become enthusiastic about how politics works, how geopolitics works, how regional dynamics works, they get into relevant positions and they move up and they have jobs and they're fundamental to the operation of the mamlakat, the kingdom. Eventually, you've got a body in that country with a significant amount of wealth and power, and it becomes harder and harder to ignore their desires.
Sure.
So from the inside of this mechanism, there is a pressure on the administration from the citizenry to do something. And so the administration can either listen, or they can placate, or they can ignore and risk real instability. And most likely, they will have to compromise to some extent. Obviously, some administrations completely bungle it. Some administrations finesse it very well. And some administrations just put more repression on their civilians and, don't deal with it. But what I'm saying is the citizenry everywhere has power. Is just you have to wield it differently. Someone has a hammer, someone has a knife. They're both tools, but they're not for the same thing, right? And if you're trying to, make a chicken curry, That knife's going to be used for hammer, not so much. I don't know what you're going to do with a hammer. Maybe turn it into keema. Maybe turn it into minced chicken. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't have a perfect answer, because you know what, Majid? A lot of the time, what I've seen is we hope as individuals that we're going to see change like that. I want some change today, bro. In the next 2 years, please. I'll be patient. Next 2-3 years, I want change. Actually, it doesn't work like that.
Nah, it doesn't work out.
There are people who have fought their whole lives for something. There are people who have sown seeds and watered and taken care and saw that tree grow, and they are old and they are withering, and they know they're never going to eat a single fruit from this tree. No problem.
Subhanallah.
We need to look beyond our lives. If you look at the situation in your country, you assess that, yallah, this administration's, their priorities are busted. They're GG. Okay, fine. So then you do something maybe similar to what I'm doing. Find something where you feel like you're moving the needle in the right direction, but it's not time yet to pull the trigger, because there's no trigger. It's hopeless, bro. Fine. If it's hopeless, maybe it won't be hopeless for your sons and daughters. Maybe it won't be hopeless for our grandchildren. You know, Sami Hamdi, a political analyst or commentator on Thinking Muslim, he says, maybe we'll go to Jannah one day, and there'll be people there saying, oh, you guys are of that generation. Before we liberated Palestine, we came after you guys. We liberated Palestine. You weren't there to see it. Nah, I wasn't there to see it. I just did some social media things, and I taught some people this and that. And they grew up and they learned and they made the moves in their countries. And eventually, the occupied territories were liberated. We never saw it. No problem. Your life, your mission should not be focused on you seeing the results. It should be focused on getting the results one day. One day, inshallah. One day, inshallah, you think, right? So if you're saying, the situation looks hopeless, you're looking at the situation looking hopeless because you've constrained the whole trajectory to only your life. Why is it why is it ending when you're ending? Are you the center of the universe? Are you the star of the show? Bro, set aside your main character syndrome and just work towards the benefit. You know, the lion of the desert, Omar al-Mukhtar. What did he say when I think it was the Italians, it might have been the French. It's embarrassing that I forgot. One of the colonial powers. You can interchange
Italians. It was Italians.
The Italians, when they captured him, and he's still showing resistance, they're like, "Why are you fighting, bruv?" They didn't say bruv. They're not from East London, but they said, "Why are you fighting? You're an old man, and we are technologically far superior. So why don't you just give up?" And he said, "Because you will have to fight the next generation. And then the next generation, and then the next generation. Bruv, eventually you guys are going to get fed up, or you're going to deal with some problems at home. They're still on their homeland. They're still here." Let me just give you an example that just came to mind. I read today that 50,000 Israeli soldiers in the IDF have dual nationality. Do you know what that means? It means if things get hairy, my guy's got a passport to another country. Whereas the Palestinians, bruv, they're like, my grandfather was from here, and his before him, and his before him, and his before, and you know what? I'm going to be here. I got a broken leg. I need to go Egypt to get that sorted out. If you let me through the border, I'll get that sorted out. Then I'm coming back here, bro. Best believe, if you let me through. If you don't, no problem. We'll hold the keys in our hand, and when we have children, we'll give them the keys and the deeds to our land. And when they're going to come back. You're not going to let them back. Okay, they're going to give it to their kids. They're going to come back. We're going to come back. They're thinking long term. And the Palestinians, obviously, they move differently. They say everything is made in China except for bravery and courage. Bravery and courage is made in Palestine. Everything else is made in China. That's true. Courage is made in other places as well. But my point is, you have to think positively, and you have to think analytically long term. The heaviest results come from long-term thinking, not sporadic. Something becomes a crisis. Now I care about it. Afterwards, I don't care about it. You can't think like that, brother. If you look at the Sahaba and the Tabi'in that came after them, some of their works, they're planning 2 generations in advance. What the heck? People nowadays will be like, what do you even mean? What's that even mean? Well, I'm not even going to get to see it. Even my kids aren't going to be able to see it. Nah, bro, that's not worth fighting for. Oh, really? You have to change your thinking. You have to be willing to be that person that plants that seed, that takes care of that tree, that nurtures it, sees it grow, and knows that 10 years after I die, this is going to have a mango hanging from it. Someone's going to enjoy that mango. Not me, but that's okay. Someone's going to enjoy it. You have to have that. You have to have that mindset. For the people who have that mindset, the people who come after them will mention them or think of them perhaps, and they'll thank them in some way, and they'll keep advancing that mission. And that's what's most impactful, most dangerous for anyone who opposes what you want, because they're thinking now the best way to break these guys is to make them feel hopeless. You know, one of the video, a common theme I come back to in some of my videos is in democratic countries, there's often this attempt by those in power to convince the electorate, the voters, that whatever they vote for, they'll get more of the same. So just don't bother. They want you to think you have no impact because, first of all, you do have impact, but they want you to think you don't. Because if you imagine a pie, the pie of power in a country, different people hold different percentages of that pie, different slices. My zero animation budget is coming in. Normally you'd have an animated pie, but I just do this in my videos. I just go like that and people have to work it out for themselves. This is what happens when you don't have like an animation team. But imagine the pie of power. Yeah. Someone really powerful owns 1% by himself. And then another whole group owns 10%, a whole group. And another whole voting block owns 20%. The citizens of a country, a lot of the time, they are deactivated power. They have power, but it's deactivated. They're not mobilized. If they mobilize, they can move the needle. They can move state policy. They can turn that whole flipping ship in a different direction. Slowly. Ships turn slowly, right? Ships don't go bam, bam, bam. They turn slowly. Ask the captain of the Titanic, to his great frustration. Ships turn very slowly, right? But they do turn, right? You can't just, you turn, you can take that, it will turn eventually. But if those who already have power, I already have power, Majid doesn't have power, why would I let him eventually activate his power? It's better for me, the one who already has power, to convince my guy over here that whatever you do is hopeless, man. Just give up. Just give up. And you give up. You do give up, right? Millions of you give up. And then those in power, they continue as they are. But as soon as you activate, they get worried. Case in point, look at social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Why are they being like, why is there a stranglehold all of a sudden? Because people saw on their phones what the heck is going on in Gaza. They were like, I call BS on what I'm listening to in the mainstream. This is what's happening. Look, my guy's walking around with a sack full of body parts of his family members. How are you going to tell me that's defending yourself? How, from what angle? You can't hoodwink people who are watching that. So they said, okay, let's turn the tap off on that. That's a bit too shaky. Let me buy that. Let me buy that, and then I'll switch it off. Right? That's what the people in power do. And then you move somewhere else. You know, for example, just a couple of days ago, there's a social media platform called Upscrolled. It was built by a Palestinian man operating from Australia with laws in Ireland. Basically, he made it very he's made it very difficult to take down. Bruv, Upscrolled is suspended from being downloaded on the Google Play Store. What happened? Why did it get randomly selected? Like we get randomly selected at the airport. My guy's app got randomly selected, imagine. Anyway, jokes aside, there's no concrete public reason given yet as to why Upscroll was suspended. But the point is, the people in power get very worried when people who have dormant power start mobilizing, because they're like, and then I have a smaller share of the power. Can't let that happen. And they mobilize against it. But they're struggling more and more nowadays, especially special interests, for example, in the US, in relation to the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC. They're really struggling. Americans, for example, across the nation, they're voting in people who say, I don't take any money from AIPAC. Do you know how bonkers that is, Majid, and your audience? Just give it 3 years ago. 3 years ago, if you said, I don't take money from AIPAC as a thing you're proud of, khalas, it's GG for your political career. Now it's the other way around. Now you're kind of having to be ashamed that you take money from APAC. There's even a social media APAC tracker saying this person gets this much money from APAC, and loads of people are like, okay, can't vote for him then, because he's not got American interests at heart. He's got Israeli interests at heart. So it's completely flipped the script. And APAC's in the most stressful situation. I don't know how Netanyahu's getting sleep at night. Honestly, he must have a good pillow, Majid, because he's got so many things to be worried about these days. Iran, America abandoning them, the American electorate not really falling in line with APAC these days. Man's out here with a country with zero strategic depth and losing political power, which is the only real power they had. It must be a stressful time for Netanyahu. Maybe he'll retire early. I don't know, for his own, health and well-being. Allah knows best.
Subhanallah, bro. No, subhanallah. With what you said there about having the vision, I think that's really key, because when you speak to Muslims, and generally, I mean, this is something which is universal. It's not doesn't really affect non-Muslims only, but when you speak to Muslims, and I think that's why people don't ask the question of what can I do within my capacity. It's always, well, we'll just have to wait for the Mahdi, because they don't, because they don't want to do something. And in terms of what you said of having that awareness geopolitically, and I think the example that came to mind was, if somebody's going to boil water,
Yeah.
and if he doesn't understand the process of water being boiled, he's going to stand there first minute, second minute, he's going to think nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening. What's happening?
Right.
Yeah, because he's not trying to dip his finger in.
Right.
He's just looking at it.
But the one who understands that there's a process, right? And even though right now it might not seem like too much is happening, it's only a matter of time, but something will happen eventually if you're patient enough and you keep the heat on. If you turn the heat off thinking, well, nothing's happening, well, nothing's freaking going to happen anyway, then is there? Water's not going to get boiled.
Let him boil. It's a new Gen Z. We should develop something, Majid. They say let him cook. We'll be like, let him boil. Let him boil. You're right.
We've got to trademark that, yeah?
We got let the man boil. He's boiling still. Yeah.
That's it, bro. And that's the thing, because what happens is, whilst this process is going on, there are parties who are trying to turn off the heat, right? Yeah. And we need to just ensure that heat remains. And whatever heat you bring to the table, some may bring a greater heat, some may bring a little bit, but at the end of the day, as long as people are contributing towards that process, and subhanAllah, whether they end up seeing the final result of the water boiling ultimately is irrelevant, because like you said,
it's irrelevant.
It's about planting those seeds. And it reminds me of, I'm sure you must have watched the Earth shows when they were big time. Did you ever? Yeah. So whenever they always used to show where there's that dream where there's that tree, and what does that tree represent? That tree represents that Ottoman legacy that's going to come.
Yeah. Right? What they're going to build. Yeah.
What they're going to build. By that time, they're just a little tribe going from one place to another, but it's trying to set that
nomadic as well. Yeah.
They're nomadic. So I think that's subhanAllah, I think that's probably the most important point. That's really key. And I think that's where the honesty kicks in, because we can all make excuses. We can all point the fingers at it's them. But ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He doesn't burden a soul with more than it can take, with more than its scope. And I think where we need to be self-reflective is think, am I doing what I can do? And then also then be fair, be consistent, and then apply that onto other people, and don't expect miraculous change when they also will have limitations. They also will be restricted to a scope. And I think that's the fair thing to do. But bro, inshallah, it's been really interesting speaking to you, man. I did have a planned world tour where I wanted to go through some of the latest crises and get your angle on them. But what I want to do is I want to ask you a really important question. I think from your point of view, because it's only February, right? If you were to give one bold prediction for 2026, what is it?
One bold prediction for 2026. Bold, really. I struggle with bold, immediate takes, Majid.
So you
Um,
know, I was watching your video earlier
mm,
about the German Chancellor, basically when he said that the post World War II world
order.
based order is finished.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you think that's gonna pan out then? Because I think that's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one. How do you
That
think
is
that's gonna
crazy.
pan out? Are they
That's
gonna
crazy.
repair it, or do you think it's now gonna go in a different direction?
Nice. It's a one-way street, bro. It's a one-way street. So, um, it's a one-way street because we've entered, and this is, I suppose, not bold in 2026, but is bold in our lifetimes. Um, one generation ago, my dad's generation, I couldn't be talking about, the shifting geopolitics because it wasn't shifting back then. It was Pax Americana, American peace, meaning American global hegemony. After the Soviet Union collapsed, America has no equal, right? They have no competitor. Now they have a competitor. They have a challenger. Is the dragon of the east? Is China? So in this age, bro, anything could happen. To be honest, in terms of in 2026 or in 2027, 2028, China's got what I call challenger velocity. So it's a challenger to America's sort of domination, and that sub is moving so fast in terms of their progress that I would be surprised actually if America could contain them. I just made a few days ago. I made a video, I think, saying I'm calling it now. America can't contain China anymore. It's over.
I watched
And
that.
I've been very conservative. You could have made that prediction maybe even 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Some people very forward thinking. So I would say I don't know about bold, but for geopolitics, people interested should look at what's happening in America, should look at what's happening in China, because those are the two poles in the multipolar world order. Those are the two centers of gravity, and every other nation will sort of have to adjust or accommodate or align some way or another between those two countries. If administrations are very careful, very clever, they might be able to play one great power off another and win from both parties, right? If they mess up, they might align themselves completely with one great power, and that great power drops support for them, and then they're sort of left out in the cold with no jacket. So for the case of Europe, I've described from like 2 years ago now. I described Europe as Western Europe as America's extension into Europe from across the Atlantic. It's like the arm that America uses to extend across the Atlantic and punch the Soviet Union in the face. Well, Soviet Union's khalas is gone now. So now the Americans aren't looking across the Atlantic. They're looking across the Pacific at China. So now what's happening across the Atlantic, not my problem. America first, baby. I'll see you guys later. I'm piecing out of it. Now the Western Europeans are like, hang on. We've got no military. We've been enjoying your protection all these years. What do you mean you're piecing out? And they're like, America first, baby. That's your problem now. Russia's your problem. So now my hot take is, it's not a hot take. Western Europe, you will see, decouple more aggressively in rhetoric, in action, in economics, in military from America. They will try very hard to decouple. And it's a sink or swim situation, Majid, because you see, European Union is not really built to become that third pole in a multipolar world order. Economically, it's very capable, but it's so disunited. You got France trying to drive one way, Germany trying to drive the other way, Britain like I'm yeeting out of the union, but then it's sort of coming back now. It's because Europe, Britain has realized you can't really be an island off the coast of Europe and not, mess with, not work with Europe. Yeah, you have to be part of Europe. So I would predict you might see Britain come join the EU again, or if that doesn't happen, I would say Britain will remain a very key pillar of NATO in Europe. I call it Euro NATO because America's, bruv, if Russia attacks a European country, you think America's going to come? You think America's going to fly their boys into Lithuania or Latvia? Nah, bruv. China's over there laughing at you. So I'd say, look, keep an eye out on America, keep an eye out on China, and keep an eye out on how every other nation, every other region is trying to work with those two powers to build a better situation for themselves. It's an interesting time. For the Muslim Ummah, I don't think we're in a situation where we're in a position for Ummah spanning unity, but there is a natural drift. If everyone stays still and is affected by nothing, there's a drift of there's a drift of like Muslim countries towards one another. And as America leaves the Middle East, I think I would forecast Turkey or Turkey and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to drift closer together. And they're all native administrations. Israel is a non-native administration. Yeah, I'll just end with this. You see, I sometimes, just for like narrative flair, I give countries, I allocate animals to countries. They're usually pre-allocated, it's historically known. So I call Russia the Russian bear and the Persian lion, that's Iran. And I said the Israeli kingfisher one day, and people were like, "What the flip? What is it? What's a kingfisher, bro?" And I'm like, "Look up a kingfisher natively, a common species of kingfisher. It's a bird. It's a little bird, very capable in the air, but very fragile, right? Very frail, little thing, and it's blue." So I was like, "Israel's blue. It's quite fragile. It's got very little strategic depth of their country. Like if you invade them, you blink and you miss the country. It's a very small country, right? So you invade them. If you can get to the capital, is GG, unless they start dropping nukes, I guess. But like the kingfisher, they're very fragile. They're blue. They've got great air power because the kingfisher is a bird, and Israel has a very cutting edge air force, as obviously US provided. And not hating on anyone, but the kingfisher is not native to the Middle East. It's native to Eastern Europe. So that's my prediction. I think in the Middle East, you'll see the four native administrations that are the regional powers. They will start drifting towards one another, and that will leave Israel in a difficult spot. I'm not sure how they'll deal with it. Even Iran, I've included in that because as America leaves, the other countries look at Iran as a reasonable counterbalance to Israel that benefits their country as well. So I'm not talking about brotherhood, you see. I'm not talking about this sort of Muslim, oh, mashallah. No. I'm talking about administration's cold, hard geopolitics. That's the best way, because that's the best way to assess situations, because then you won't be left disappointed if you're relying on something faith-based or spiritual. You're looking at things practical calculation-wise, and those tend to be more reliable bets in this sort of transactional, practical world. Spirituality has really taken a nosedive, I think, in our age. So we've had a long conversation. Inshallah, maybe if you invite me on again, we can talk about other stuff.
Bro,
and we can talk about regional.
Bro, there's so much to talk about. Like I said, I had a list of things, but I wanted to get your take on, because I think it's really important in terms of people have an understanding what is politics and why it's important to actually be familiar with it. And I think that was the main priority for this. But there's so much to talk about, man. But in terms of practical steps, bro, for the people watching, listening, give us 3 practical steps, basically, to for people to stay politically astute.
Okay. First step is to not allow your emotion to govern your long-term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that if your long-term planning is foundationed, is on something as short-term as emotion, if that collapses, the whole building collapses. You don't want to do that. Take a step back, calculate, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to learn? Where do I want to be? Maybe you're not sure even, but don't make long-term plans based on short-term emotional sort of knee-jerk reactions to certain scenarios. Better to calm yourself down, understand that you're just a little blip in the broad tapestry of humanity. Don't take it too seriously. Just see how you can positively make a contribution, inshallah. Right? We're all trying to move the needle just a bit. I would say that's the first thing. Second thing, stay positive. Stay positive about the Ummah and humanity as a whole. Dr. Tariq Suwaidan, who was also on the Thinking Muslim.
Yeah.
You're probably getting a good idea of what kind of podcast I might listen to occasionally. Hashtag Thinking Muslim. Hashtag Muhammad Jalal. I'm joking. Dr. Tariq Suwaidan said, I believe, that in a population, you require 5% of the people to be truly motivated towards a goal, and that will just move the whole nation.
Subhanallah.
5% is all it takes, because 95% of people are going to be sheep, or, to be more respectful, followers. You can't have not everyone has to be a leader, brother. A car can have 4 seats, only one of them has a wheel in front of it. That's 25%. Anyway, so I've said the smaller number, right? You're driving a bus, let's say. So imagine you've got a bus, maybe I've got a bus, and there's loads of seats for passengers, right? So why I'm tying that back to being positive is, don't be like upset. Oh, you don't care about the ummah. Oh, you don't care about politics. Oh, you're hopeless. No. Don't worry. He's probably one of the 95. He's ready. He's a contributor. He will support a good cause. He's just not willing to lead. No problem. Find the leaders. Every 100 will have 5 guys. Find the 5 guys and go out and eat at 5 guys, and then go and do something amazing, like, I don't know, a beneficial podcast, inshallah, right? That's the second thing. So stay positive. Not everyone is a leader. Most are followers, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just have to find the leaders, or maybe you can be a leader yourself, right? And the last thing I want to say is, I had a good one. What was the question again?
Basically, what are practical steps for people to become politically astute?
I got it. So loads of people say, Mahfuz, how do I understand the news without the Western spin? What are you doing? Like, how can I do this without relying on your videos? So I say, when you're looking at news, you have the internet, brother. Please look at the same news from different sources. So something happens. Look at the I'm not saying don't look at the BBC, by the way. Lots of people think, I should shun Western media. No, then you're missing out one perspective. You need to form, iPhones, when you set up Face ID or Thumb ID, it says, okay, move your thumb around a bit, like move it a bit this way, show me your whole face, like go like that. So you need the whole perspective. You need the BBC, you need the CNN, you need the Al Jazeera, you need the New Arab, you need TRT from Turkey, you need the Middle East Eye. You need Dawn News, Hindustan Times, Tehran Times. You need the Straits Times. You need South China Morning Post. You need the Financial Times. You need the Economist. Financial Times is a good one. I get like these newspapers that come to my house basically at this point. They do subscriptions. Economist is a good one. It's a bit expensive, not gonna lie. It's a bit mad. Financial Times especially is a good news source that I would recommend people read, because every news source has a bias. The Financial Times, their bias is money. That's easy to filter out. You see, they're not biased towards the West or Russia. They're a bit West, but they talk about China a lot, because a lot of money is in China now. So they're not particularly biased. So if you read the news from a variety of sources, you'll get a comprehensive understanding. I think that's very important. But obviously, that requires you to actually be in the habit of reading a lot, which most people will not be able to implement, I think. But still, look at news from various sources. I would say don't box yourself into one. Not even one, sort of from the Muslim world, let's say. Not even just an anti-Western. Look at the Western side as well. Get a full comprehensive otherwise you'll just be blindly anti-West, which is also not informed. You're just on the other side now.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are my 3 bits of advice.
Jazakallah khair, bro.
Sorry, I took so long.
No, mashallah. Really, really good piece of advice. Good pieces of advice. So, bro, NewsBaba, where can people follow your work?
So I'm on TikTok and I'm on YouTube. If you type in news and then type in Baba, I'll come up, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, the platforms are big enough that if you just type that in, it comes up. So follow me on TikTok, on YouTube, especially on YouTube, because TikTok is a bit... They randomly select your videos a lot of the time, let's just say. If you present news and analysis, it's getting a bit flaky. But YouTube is a lot more stable. Support my work there. And keep learning, man. Keep learning, keep watching with your spare time. Lots of people watch my stuff as a podcast because I talk too much. So they're just like, I'll stop looking at his face. I'll just drive or knit or whatever, or cook while I listen to this guy.
So with your podcast, I didn't even know you had a podcast.
No. Oh, I don't have a podcast. I sit down and I talk for 10 minutes. I'm calling that a podcast. It's not real podcast like yours.
But what platform is that on though? Is that just on YouTube, or is that like, have you got it audio only on a platform, podcast platform?
Nah, don't call me up, bro. It's just on YouTube at the moment. Oh, okay. I haven't set up on anything else.
All right, okay. Yeah, because that'll be useful. Because the only thing is, bro, if people are driving and they got YouTube on, I know they're gonna want to look at what you're doing and what tea you're drinking and what book you got and stuff like that. You know what I mean? might result in an accident.
Absolutely can't have that. Can't have that. I tell people, I say, listen, get your tea ready unless you're driving. I say, I do add safety disclaimers occasionally. I need to put myself on Spotify probably, and also sort my nose out. I think every time my nose is runny, someone suggests like lemon tea or something. But yeah, YouTube, TikTok, type in NewsBaba, you'll see me. I'm especially looking for some support on growing my YouTube channel because right now it's looking a bit threadbare.
MashaAllah, no, it's still doing good, bro. Still doing good.
It's
And
okay. It's okay,
definitely, I
inshallah.
would recommend everyone to go subscribe, support our brother. The work he does is tremendous. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you strong, bro. Keep you strong. Keep you going. And
Likewise.
you've mentioned many times that there are big plans in store. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make those plans also successful. No idea what they are, but we'll wait for the surprise. I think
Inshallah. Inshallah.
one thing we're taking away from this podcast is let's not be hasty. So in terms of brother Mahfuz's plans, let's not be hasty. Let's wait and let them arrive, inshallah ta'ala.
Let me boil.
Yes, that's the one, bro. Trademarked. But brother said, Jazakallah khair for joining me, man. It was really good. And definitely, if you're gonna have time, because I think it's more on your side, definitely want to get you on because there's so much I want to get your views on, to be honest with you, which can't be done in one episode. So if we have time, maybe after Ramadan,
Inshallah.
let's
Inshallah.
get
It was
this
my
going.
pleasure, bro. Jazakallah khair for inviting me. We'll make some time, inshallah. If your esteemed audience find it beneficial.
I'm sure they
I'll
will,
make some
bro.
time,
I'm sure they
inshallah.
will,
I'll make
man.
some time.
So yeah, bro, thanks for coming on, and thanks for everyone listening and watching. Make sure you subscribe, inshallah, like, share with your family and friends. Like brother Mahfuz says, share with the aunts, with the aunties, and with the uncles. So yeah, and until the next one, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Likewise, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.